starts exhibiting this isolation tendency, and she's trying to, kind of push people out, and she's kind of turning inward in her life. And she gets into a woe is me thing when she says to her daughter-in-laws that it has been far more bitter for me than it has been for you. Now, we kind of have to, step back and say, now, wait a minute. Everybody's lost a husband here. But Naomi's kind of doing this thing where, well, it's just far more bitter for me than it is for you. And she's kind of taking away that common place that they have together to share sorrow. And she also decides, when she's going to Israel, she makes it very plain to these women, you know what, you go back to your families, I'll go back to mine. Don't come with me, you go back. And there's this tendency to pull away from very good people in her life. And there was one good person, Ruth, and that's the daughter-in-law, Ruth, who decides, no, I'm going to go with you, Naomi. Where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people, and my God, your God will be my God, she says. And she decides to go with her. So, Ruth has this idea, I'm going to isolate, but Ruth says, no, that's not good enough. Now, maybe you can identify in your own life that you may have done some of that, where you feel a little bit uncertain and hopeless about some situations, and you decide that you're trying to pull away from people. Maybe take a thought back to some of those circumstances in your life and see, did it accomplish anything? Did it get me moving forward? Just something to think about. And obviously, if she's experienced all this loss in her life, she's going to have some emotional bitterness and she's going to have some anger, and she certainly does. When Naomi returns to Israel and the women of the community come out and see her, she says to them, oh, call me no longer Naomi, call me Mara. Now the word Mara, the name Mara means bitterness. This woman had become so bitter about her circumstances, she wanted everyone to call her bitter. Everyone to address her as bitter, like walking down the street. Oh, hello, bitter. How you doing? Like, that is just, whoa, over the edge. She is really emotionally angry. So to recap, so she's experiencing a little bit of trust problems. She's kind of trying to insulate herself, isolate from others. And she's also nursing a big load of bitterness. It's huge. Now, these are some significant roadblocks for hopeful living. But we're going to take a look at the rest of the story and how this thing turns around. And we're also going to take a look from this situation, how should Naomi have hope from here? How should she be living in a hopeful way, given all these circumstances that have just clouded in on her? So what does it mean? I want to ask you, what does it mean to live with hope? If you just know God and you're a Christian, you're automatically filled with hope. It's all there. Maybe sometimes that's the case. Or is it more like something that takes some life experiences, takes going through some struggles, and then it's something that grows over time? And I thought that a good analogy would be to take a look at what it would be like to grow muscles. And I brought a weight from my house, okay? And I thought, as we go through circumstances in life, that if we work certain principles in our life, if we work certain thought patterns in our life, then we are going to be more equipped to deal with circumstances that are just hopeless. If I work this weight the wrong way, I develop the wrong muscles. But it's very important to work the right way if I want to develop, my bicep in here. That's the right muscle, right? Is there a weight professional here? Am I working my muscle? Yeah. Okay, so if I really want to work the right muscle, I want to develop hope, I've got to do it the right way. I've got to have the right thought processes to do that. All right, so I'm going to suggest 5 ways that you can exercise your mind, your spirit. 5 ways that you can develop a muscle of hope. And I'm going to suggest 1, you need to remember and discover who God is. I'm saying remember to those of you who are established in your faith, because you need to remind yourself about who God is. what his character is like. And I'm going to say, discover, to those of you who are coming back to faith and you're just exploring God and you're picking up the pieces of your relationship with him, I'm going to say you're going to need to discover it, because you're going to go into the Bible and you're going to read about him. And I think that is so cool, that you're here and that you're willing to explore a relationship with him. Number 2, we're going to look for his grace. Okay? He's always putting something into your life. Number 3, you're going to look and find meaning in your circumstances, because that's going to give you some traction when you see there's some purpose. Number 4, I'm going to suggest that you need to zoom out and see if there's a big picture. Is there something going on in the big scheme of things? Maybe there is. And number 5, you're going to have to remember one last thing. There's some mystery involved. It's part of the process. So the first step is we're going to remember and discover who God is. And that is that God is faithful. This is the one thing that that's one aspect that you got to remember, is that he is faithful to you. Right from the beginning, in the Old Testament, God spoke to Abraham in Genesis 17:7. And he said to Abraham, I will establish my covenant as an everlasting covenant between me and you and your descendants after you, for generations to come, to be your God and the God of your descendants after you. That was the Old Testament. Now, if you come into the New Testament, he cracks it even further open, and he says, in a very famous passage, John 3:16, it's the one that's used most regularly from the Bible when people are talking to others about God's love for them. And he says, I'm not willing that any should perish, but that all should have everlasting life. God has a pattern from the Old Testament straight through to the New of everlasting concern for your life. That's a pretty long concern. Everlasting. He wants to be your God if you will let him. That is a little bit of the truth that Naomi lost at the peak of her circumstances. At the very peak, she lost that sense that he was right there for her and faithful with her. And that's understandable. I think that's understandable. But that's just the peak of those circumstances. It's time to, get yourself regrounded, And remember, God is faithful. And we can do that through reading the Bible. We can do that through prayer. And we can do that by being a part of a church like River City in our communities and remembering God's faithfulness. Okay, so the second thing we're going to do is we're going to look for his grace, because he's pouring it into your life. And it's just very true that we need to do that famous thing called count your blessings. And counting doesn't mean literally numbering. I think it's more about name it. Say that it happened. Share that it happened. Well, Naomi thought in that circumstance that the hand of the Lord had gone against her. He was actually giving her the most loyal and devout daughter-in-law. And she stuck by her. Now, this might be a good time to tell you a few other details, like the rest of the story. And I'm going to do it really brief, because I can't do 4 chapters in one sermon. It's going to be really brief. And I would encourage you to go back and read the story. It's only 4 chapters. It won't take long. But what happens is Ruth and Naomi go back to Israel. And Ruth says, we got to get food. And so she goes out to glean. She could go out to a property in Israel, and she could go behind harvesters that were actually harvesting that property and collect what they missed. And that was how that culture took care of its widows, is that the harvesters would leave a little bit behind so that widows could come out and get some grain. Well, she lands up in the field of a man named Boaz, who happened to be totally taken with her.